Craterus, trampled to death by his own men in battle in 321 BCE. Craterus was one of the most popular generals in the Macedonian army, and one of Alexander's best and most trusted subordinates. He served under Parmenio on the left flank during the Battle of Issus, commanding the phalanx. During the siege of Tyre, with Parmenio absent, Craterus commanded. At Gaugamela, he resumed his role as Parmenio's second-in-command on the hard-pressed left flank. After Alexander had Parmenio executed on suspicion of plotting against him, Craterus's importance as a general greatly increased. During the brutal campaigns in Bactria and Sogdiana, Craterus often functioned as an independent commander, and he was invariably successful. At the Battle of the Hydaspes in 326, Craterus stayed on the western bank of the river, while Alexander found a ford to the north and launched his flank attack. Craterus then successfully crossed the Hydaspes with the main force, including the phalanx, and secured the victory for Alexander. After the Hydaspes, Craterus was sent out on minor independent missions to build cities and secure supplies for Alexander's forces as he moved further and further to the east. When Alexander eventually decided to sail down the Indus, Craterus and Hephaestion respectively commanded the land forces marching down either bank of the river. Craterus commanded the bulk of the army when they marched back toward Persia overland through a safer northern route than Alexander's disastrous passage through the Gadrusian desert. During celebrations at Susa in early 323, Craterus was married to a niece of Darius III. This was a great honor, since the only other Macedonians allowed to marry into the old ruling house of Persia were Hephaestion and Alexander himself. Many veterans wanted to return home, so Alexander sent Craterus to command this contentious lot, to build a fleet in Cilicia, and to take over from the ancient Antipater as regent in Europe. While he had often remonstrated with Alexander concerning the latter's desire to use Persian customs, much to Alexander's annoyance, his consistently good generalship and loyalty were appreciated and rewarded by Alexander. Furthermore, Craterus's anti-Persian sentiments were shared by the rank and file, which made him very popular with the troops and the right man to escort the mutinous Silver Shields and others back home. Craterus was still in Cilicia and away from the center of the action when Alexander died in Babylon in June of 323. Orders came from Perdiccas in Babylon that Craterus was to proceed with his mission and would be co-general in Europe along with Antipater. For reasons unknown, Craterus took his sweet time getting to Greece, while Antipater was fighting and losing the early phases of the Lemian War. Rom suggests that Craterus was contemplating either taking Antipater's famously wise eldest daughter Phila as wife and ruling Europe, or sticking with his Persian noble bride and trying to rule in Asia. There is also the chance that the illness he contracted right after leaving Babylon had flared up again, or that he had had to deal with a local revolt of some kind in Cilicia. Such are the state of our sources that it's hard to really say too much with certainty. It is possible that Craterus was waiting around until he had a sufficient fleet to deal with the mighty Athenian navy. At any rate, he arrived in time to save the hard-pressed Antipater from the Greeks and won the decisive Battle of Cranon in 322, which effectively ended the Lemian War and led to regime change in many cities, most notably at Athens, where radical democracy was abolished for the last time. If there had been any tension between the long-established Antipater and the homecoming Craterus, it was dissipated by Perdiccas's disposition of offices, which was clearly designed to leave himself in full command of the empire, and gave none of the other major players a big enough role. From what we can tell, Antipater and Craterus functioned as equals and worked together well in organizing opposition to Perdiccas. Since Macedonia had the largest source of manpower, they had a great deal of power. Greece, however, was still intent on causing them grief, and a new power, the Aetolian League, needed conquering. As the two men were on the verge of complete victory against the Aetolians, Antigonus arrived and convinced them that they needed to focus on Perdiccas and his followers in Asia Minor. Craterus and Antipater returned to Asia with Antigonus and the defeated Neoptolemus in 321 or 320. Antipater was to march to Cilicia to get nearer to Perdiccas, who had gone south after Ptolemy in Egypt, while Craterus was going to march into Cappadocia and crush Eumenes before rejoining Antipater in Cilicia. However, contrary to his expectations, Craterus' battle against Eumenes ended well before the heavy troops got involved. Eumenes decided to overpower Craterus' wings with cavalry and to try to win the battle as quickly as possible. Though ancient battles were rarely decided solely by light troops and cavalry, it worked this time, as Craterus fell off his horse and got trampled in the fracas on one flank, while his subordinate Neoptolemus was slain in personal combat with Eumenes. Craterus' infantry surrendered without a fight and agreed to join Eumenes, but melted away by night to rejoin Antipater. Craterus was probably a couple years shy of his 50th birthday when he fell in battle. Alexander tended to distrust either the loyalty or competence of many of his officers, but he consistently put a great deal of faith and responsibility in Craterus' hands. Many of the ancients, including Plutarch, seem to regard Craterus' defeat at the hands of Eumenes as a complete fluke. Had Craterus been present at Babylon as Alexander lay dying, there is some speculation that Alexander would have passed his ring to Craterus instead of Perdiccas. Had he succeeded in crushing Eumenes, he would have found himself at the head of a mighty army, and he would have probably been left as general of Asia rather than Antigonus. Had he lost and had to stay with Antipater, he most likely would have become general of Europe in lieu of his lieutenant Polyperchon. The future held a lot of possibilities for this capable and popular veteran, but he fell far short of supremacy. That is not to suggest that he had a small impact, however. His victory at Cranon saved the Antipatриds and preserved Macedonian hegemony in Greece, while his defeat and death instantly made Eumenes a major player and created the conditions for the rise of the ambitious, but so far not very successful, Antigonus the One-Eyed.